First of all, it is my great pleasure to introduce my friend Chander, who I had met a few months ago, and we hit it off so great. I was like, "Come to the Sidebar Summit. You're gonna love it." I think he enjoyed it. He wants to stay closer to the Sidebar community, and hopefully one day we'll get him actually into the community as a member. But I'm so impressed with Chander. He's been a founder, entrepreneur. He's also scaled multiple $100 million plus businesses. Right now, he's teaching, he does TED Talks, he is a mentor and advisor for many founders at different startups. Like, he's all the things. So, if anybody hasn't already checked out his LinkedIn profile, go check it out, make a connection with him. He's brilliant. And I'll tell you that, like, I'm so impressed and I'm so excited that he's here with us today. Um, Very exciting topic because I think so many of us are just trying to figure out how AI is going to disrupt everything. And Chandler said that he wanted to give a talk on how selling into AI is different from selling into sort of standard SaaS, of which he's done throughout his whole career. So with that, I'd like to introduce my friend Chandler and take it away.
Thank you very much, Ha, for that very kind introduction. And thanks everybody for joining. I am very excited about sharing what I'm learning. And you will see the idea here is to have a discussion. Please interrupt me anytime you have a question. I would rather cover 0 slides and answer questions than focus on covering the slides, because the point is knowledge sharing and nobody has figured it out. I'm sharing things that I think are helpful. And if you have other thoughts, let's talk about them. Okay. Can you all see my screen?
Yep, looks good.
Okay. So I have an AI project that you can all check out, godstranslator.com, and I think they will get the slides, yeah? You're on mute.
Sorry, yes, we could definitely send it out.
Yeah, so you can check that out, but it's a fun project I did mainly to get my hands dirty with Gen AI. I have podcast, blog, you can see all that later on. I think where I am, I can provide unique perspective is the technology commercializations I've been part of in the past. On network infrastructure side, that was basically making the internet faster. On semiconductor sides, creating new types of user experiences and multiple SaaS type businesses on mobile device management, energy management system, etc. Blockchain and multiple flavors of AI, noise suppression, automatic speech recognition, computer vision, machine learning, natural language processing, and Gen AI. And the reason I'm sharing all that is I've never seen something move so fast. Like, it's unbelievable the pace at which the technology is developing and getting better. Like, of all the things I've worked on, I've never seen anything like this. Okay, so my goal, as I was saying, is to give you the right things to think about. So there are no answers, they're just things to think about. So I'll start with setting up a context so you get a, see the entire tech ecosystem and how Gen AI maps into that. And, the core of the presentation is challenges and implications of SaaS versus Gen AI. I think a lot of the businesses have built around SaaS in the last 20 years. And also that's favorite category of many venture capitalists. There was vertical SaaS. So that's what, let's say, the training has been for the last 20 years. But we are finding with Gen AI, it doesn't always work. So given that, what do you do? So what things you can do to counter that? So this is my view of thinking about the tech ecosystem. You can abstract it into 5 layers. On the top are applications that we use. It could be Uber, Facebook. I still call it Twitter. anything we use as people. It could be a business employee or consumer. And then they're built on some kind of application platform. And the common ones are, um, Apple's iOS or Google Play, but Salesforce has its own marketplaces. There are many of these application platforms. And under that are the networks, like how the data moves. And below that is cloud. This is kind of the, post-cloud architecture or the ecosystem. Pre-cloud, things were different, but this is, I would say, things have evolved to in the last 20 years. And I've added some examples of, players in each layer. Uh, Intel, you've heard of, Broadcom, NVIDIA, Qualcomm, Ericsson, Huawei, AWS, but I think we are familiar with these names. So the idea is these 5 layers. And I have worked in almost all of them except cloud. And I see the business drivers are different in each layer. So how you succeed in application layer is very different than how you succeed as application platform or semiconductor. So the application layer, the 2 main drivers are user experience and customer acquisition cost. I mean, generally, a lot of companies are trying to solve problems for customers, and the ones that solves it the best way or the best possible UX tends to win. And on the CAC side, um, it's I know many companies with great products, great user experience have failed because they couldn't bring down the CAC. The world is so noisy, and if people are, let's say, willing to pay $10 a month for something, and your CAC is $1,000, that model is not going to work. And if you can't bring it down to, close to 30, $40, it'll be tough to make that business work. So these are the 2 drivers on application layer. On application platform side, you have developer ecosystem and scale. These 2 things drive success. So Nokia, I think we are all familiar with. They moved to Microsoft as the application platform. When they wanted to pick a different platform than their Symbian one. Microsoft didn't have a developer ecosystem or scale, so it didn't work. And you see what's working, the companies that have successful application platform have both developer ecosystems and scale. On the network side, I think that's the hardest category to create businesses because they're basically 2 differentiators, standards and time to market. And you have to follow standard to be in the network layer because any company that buys, let's say, a router or a wireless radio access network controller or any of these network related products, they have to follow a standard 3G, 4G, 5G, or for local level Wi-Fi 5, 6, etc. So time to market becomes important. If you have to follow standard, whoever comes out first tends to win. Then the only way for you to play is cost. The later player has to offer cheaper prices. Cloud requires scale, cost, and developer tools. I mean, if you have tried AWS console, UX is not the reason they're winning. I mean, it's a complete mess. Semiconductor, you have R&D and you have time to market. I think if you just look at the percentage of revenue they spend on R&D, it's close to 30%. Software is less than half of that. So that creates more innovation and then time to market. Let's say you are developing a chip for iPhone. If it's not ready by the time they're shipping, you lose 200 million units. Same thing with on the server side. You have to be fast. You look at NVIDIA is killing everybody. They are the best in R&D. very fast develop cycle, and they're using their CUDA like an application platform, meaning they have an ecosystem and they have scale. Okay, and this will make a lot of sense as we go through the deck. And it's also, once you understand how the entire ecosystem works, you can anticipate things much better. You can see why things are the way they are, why things are so dependent on certain companies. So if we apply this framework to Gen AI, basically the application platform layer is replaced by LLM. Rest remains the same. And I, studied and thought deeply about, okay, are the new business drivers developing? Like, or is it the same? On the application layer, we see who's winning. It's UX or interoperability, like, Lovable, 11 Labs, all the examples I have here. Like, for example, Cursor works with, it's a fork of VS Code. That's a development environment. So a user, it feels like they're using VS Code, and it's much better. You can communicate in natural language. Gives you line-by-line assistance versus, let's say, Windsurf, which is kind of a plugin. It works with multiple ones, but the UX is not as good. And distribution companies like Notion or Figma, they already have distribution. They can just press a button and you have AI. So that lowers CAC. So I think the drivers remain the same in that space as the pre-Gen AI world. Okay, let me pause here. Now I'm done with context. Now I'm moving to the next part. Okay, so I'll keep going then. So the rest of the presentation is for people who are using, or it's from that perspective. I think everybody could benefit from it, but the perspective is companies that are using LLMs to build applications for B2B. So for enterprise, mid-market, not consumer apps. Then second, coding applications are not included because they have already found a product market fit. That motion is working. So they have figured out the problems we are going to talk about. And then LLMs companies selling directly to enterprises are not included. So OpenAI, Google, because their challenges are different than what we'll discuss. And companies that make their current products AI are also not included, Notion, Figma, etc., because they already are there. It's much easier for them to expose existing customers to new features. Okay. So I think let's look at the economics of SaaS. A SaaS is pretty straightforward. So LTV is the lifetime value of a customer. So you spend money in acquiring a customer, that's CAC, and then the customer pays you some money every month or year, that's average revenue per customer. And then you have cost of serving that customer. So every month you're paying for support, infrastructure, maybe network fee, whatever that is. And some of them leave, so that's churn. So in a hypothetical example, let's say it costs you $10,000 to acquire a customer in sales and marketing. They're paying you $1,000 a month, and it costs you $100 to serve them in infrastructure support and other costs. And 1% of the customers you have leave every month. So that if you do the math, that gives you $80,000 LTV. So it's, pretty straightforward how SaaS math works. And we'll see towards the end of this presentation how the math can be very different for Gen AI. Okay, so the first kind of contrast is what is ICP for Gen AI? So ICP is ideal customer profile. It's a common term used in targeting customer personas. one, there's a lot of pressure to try Gen AI in companies because of hype, the board, the executives, everybody wants to try it. But who makes the decision? Um, let's say you have a go-to-market agent. You can use ChatGPT and ask for advice, but it's not as useful. You have to, plug in the central data repository or multiple data sources. Like you may have HubSpot or Salesforce, support tickets, and internal documents, PRDs. That will make it much more useful. But then who makes the call? And that requires process and changing of roadmap, allocation of resources. There's not a clear, okay, this person can decide for, you know, trying out this new thing. In SaaS, it's pretty clear. Is it DevOps? Is it CSO? Who is the decision maker? What is the ROI? And how do you get to them? And then because there's pressure, you like people try it. You have POCs, and if you just do a Google search, you'll see like 70 to 90% depending on the source of these POCs or experiments don't become implemented or are abandoned or not used. So things are not moving beyond POCs. And figuring this out, let's say you are a startup trying different things, different customers, it increases CAC because then you're spending a lot of money to find those customers that you're looking for. It's not like, okay, I have I don't know, CRM for healthcare, not even healthcare, mental health professionals. You know who to target. Um, okay, let me pause here. Any questions? Okay, I'll go to the next slide then. Um, does PLG work for Gen AI? I think it's that's a comment. Like SaaS became very successful with that, where product-led growth, where basically you don't have a salesperson, you can give people a free trial or reach directly to them, or offer a tier of freemium model is another example. So limited use cases are possible with PLG when internal integrations are not needed. So for example, you can ask ChatGPT to write you a PRD, or there is Chat PRD now. You can use that. Uh, but I think it's much more useful if if the tool has access to internal data. So it, when you're writing PRD, if it's connected to Jira or Atlassian or the go-to-market you're using, it has all those things, then you can't really do that with PLG. It's not like, you sign in 3 clicks for a free trial, but you need a RAG. If you may have heard the term that stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation, that basically provides the LLM context on how to answer the question. So let's say I'm working at, let's say Cisco, and I ask a question, what was my revenue last month? LLM won't know the answer because it doesn't know, but it won't say I don't know. That's separate discussion. But with RAG, you give it context on how to answer the question that comes from the enterprise data or unique data you have. And that is hard to do with like an online trial with 3 clicks. You need salespeople who, have to convince people to go through this process of giving access to the data. So SLG is necessary. That's sales-led growth, and that increases CAC. Another option is during the pilot phase or proof of concept phase, you can deploy a forward deployed engineer. That's the new buzzword Palantir popularized. Basically, You have a full-time employee or engineer focused on the customer at the customer side who's helping them implement the solution, answering their questions, and of course, that'll increase CAC. So I think to summarize this slide, it's PLG works. It's somewhat useful in some cases, but it's very useful for Gen AI apps to be very useful. You need access to the company data. Okay, next is our variable costs predictable with Gen AI. I think that's a big difference also in Gen AI and SaaS. So I think we are all familiar with Slack. If Slack has 100 users versus 1,000 users, the cost is pretty much the same. The incremental cost of adding a new user is trivial in case of Slack. But in Gen AI, every prompt is a line item. And if I may be on, on your app all day and ask a lot of questions because how the applications pay to the LLM they're using is by token. And every prompt has tokens. And depending on are they using a reasoning model or flash model, like they're different costs. So they can get out of control if you have this, if somebody's just using it all the time. So it's not predictable how people are going, how much it's going to cost you as a company to serve the customer. So that means scale can, lead to bankruptcy instead of efficiency. In SaaS, scales lead to efficiency. But in this case, if, if a lot of people are using, let's say they're paying you $10 a month and it's costing you $20 a month to serve them in token cost, that's not going to work. But you can lower costs with open source LLMs, but the risk is of falling behind because they don't move as fast in advancement. Like you look at Llama 4, it was a flop that so Meta sacked a lot of people, and they are spending $15 billion in acquiring almost half of Scale AI. So you have risk of falling behind if you're relying on open source, but you're not paying token costs of OpenAI if you're using Llama. And switching is pretty easy. So let's say you're using ChatGPT or GPT-4 to 4.5, you just point the API to a different direction. But in this case, there's deployment costs. You have to download the new version and see where the regression is, and it costs more.
So Chander, I'm assuming you're going to get into this, but I'm curious what business models do work in this new world.
That's the last slide.
Okay. And then, by the way, folks should feel free to ask questions all the time because I know we want to make this a little bit interactive. So feel free to ask questions as they come up.
I think you may be used to the format where Q&A happens afterwards, but I think we'll have plenty of time for Q&A also. But please, anytime anything's not clear, ask. Or if you're seeing something different. Okay, next is, does per user per month pricing work for Gen AI? If the product usage and cost to serve varies widely, then how do you do per seat pricing? I think we touched on that briefly on the previous slide, because you can't predict how people are going to use, and even token can be a word, it could be a sentence, or it could be a part of word. So what a token is, it's not humanly, let's say, you can't say I'm using this many words, so these are the number of tokens. You don't know. So in that world, like how do you charge per user per month? That's what the customers prefer because they have predictability. But if it's usage based, then how do they have predictability? Um, and how do you measure ROI? Like for coding, I think we have figured it out, but for the other domains, we are still figuring it out. And the latest buzzword is another one, outcome-based pricing. But I don't know how that would work because let's say I am a marketing manager and I'm paying like a GTM agent company. I want to acquire 100 customers and I'm going to spend, I don't know, $10,000. And you are my applicate Gen AI application, and I spend the money and I don't acquire 100 customers, I only acquire 80. So what? You're not gonna get paid and you spend all this money. So it's very tricky to have outcome-based pricing work because outcomes in business are, not always predictable. Uh, you can try different things, you have general ideas, but they're not black and white. Oh, this is, I think, really unique to the Gen AI world, where sales cycle can be longer than product cycle. I mean, that's very unique. Um, so for example, let's say you built your product based on GPT-4 and you're doing a POC, and then GPT 4.5 comes out while you're in trial. I mean, normally you would try to just, stick to 4 because you don't want to change anything. But the CEO reads about it because it's big news anytime a new model comes out and she wants you to switch. Then what are you going to do? You may have to switch, and then there may be regression. Your performance metrics may decline. So then you have to work on making things better, and that increases the sales cycle, and that means higher CAC. So it's very different than, in the SaaS world, we would launch an MVP and we would iterate and keep on making it better. You don't have to worry the underlying layer. I mean, here there's underlying layer on which the MVP is built upon. If that changes, you have to change your product. So, and these are not the only challenges. The other challenge is LLMs can basically do what you're doing pretty easily, depending on the application, of course. Um, so they can uh, offer the applications you are offering. You saw uh, OpenAI bought Windsurf, and they hire Fiji, one of the former Facebook executives, to exactly do this, create apps, because their cost will always be cheaper than your cost. Because you are paying an LLM for tokens, and they are the company you're paying to. So it's hard to compete with them if they get into that space. Um, so there's a fear of whatever you're doing may be absorbed by LLM. But there are always uh, exceptions. Like think about Spotify. Apple launched Apple Music, and Spotify is still doing fine. But there's still a risk that it can happen. Um, I think this answers or partially answers the question we had early on. And I got this from Sequoia, one of the Sequoia presentations, the numbers. The enterprise software total market in the US was $400 billion in 2005 when Amazon launched AWS. Today, the entire cloud market is $600 billion. So it's bigger than what just cloud is bigger than the entire enterprise software 20 years ago. So now, so the VC is underestimated. So now, in the Gen AI world, agents and services and all that, this is the estimate I saw from Sequoia. The TAM is $10 trillion just for enterprise, not counting consumer stuff, just enterprise TAM. They're anticipating is 10 trillion, and they came up at from the salaries people are getting paid, and this is worldwide. So the new meaning of SaaS is service as a software. So moving from software as a service to service as a software. Okay, so let's see how the math changes or what's possible with Gen AI. Your CAC will be much higher. So it goes to 30,000 instead of 10,000. Your revenue is similar, but your cost to serve is much higher and churn is much higher because people are still figuring it out. So you may be actually, the lifetime value becomes negative. So that's possible. So you have to be aware of the risk. What is possible? Let's say, so in summary, unit economics are messy. Pricing is weird. CAC is out of whack. LLM might become a predator. However, there's unprecedented opportunity to create change. So it's a balance of risk and opportunity. And now what do we do with that? uh, so these are my thoughts or point of view on what companies can do, given the challenges we just saw, how it's so different than SaaS. Make mom your competitive advantage. Of course, moms are always helpful, but in this case, mom is a mixture of models. Where you're not relying on one LLM to create your application. So Claude, again, for example, uses both, not Claude, sorry, Cursor. Cursor uses Claude and OpenAI, and they have their own model. So it'll be pretty difficult for, let's say, Claude or OpenAI to compete with them because even if they follow the same, making the UX better, because they have figured out what to use when. So that could be a competitive advantage. Target verifiable domains, where you can verify the answers, like that's where the adoption I'm seeing is higher. Coding is one example. You can verify it works as expected. Or let's say in some of the animation type things, it's entertainment. Actually, I was surprised that in hospitals, like, healthcare is legacy. Like they don't use technology easily. But now you go to a doctor and they're using a note taker because they can see, okay, this is what we talked about, and this is the summary they can verify. And then you have to use SLG, that's sales-led growth, hire salespeople. And then make life better for employees and reduce risk. So here, this kind of, it's like user experience. So the model Claude is using is not, so I'm again saying Claude, Cursor, is where they're making life better for developers, is making you code faster, better. And the windsurf example and the other examples are the application or agent is acting as a junior coder. You can give it a task, it can complete the task. So which one has higher risk? Give a task and that intern, let's say it's an intern, that intern can be just an idiot and they can screw up the entire system. So that's much more risky versus, something that I control. I see line by line what's happening and it can make me better. So two different models. One makes you better, another outsources your work. So I think that makes you better is a better model. Then provide predictability and control. So CFOs, let's say the estimate for the cost, you have usage-based pricing is 100K for the quarter and it goes to 200. Nobody's going to be happy. But you can implement controls. This is the usage pricing, but the organization can decide if you exceed your quota for tokens or whatever that is, they approve. Somebody has to approve. So you have to implement this account management controls when you implement the product. And finally, anticipate declining token costs. So already they're like 90% lower than a year ago, and depends on the model. Some reasoning is much higher than, let's say, non-reasoning models. But when I developed hardware products, we always knew that the hardware cost will half in 18 months, Moore's law. So when you're doing long-term plan, you can see how costs will decline. So depending on the model mixture you're using, anticipate how costs will decline so you can do better math on LTV, etc. Yeah, I think that was the last slide. Oh yeah, I see a hand. Z?
Hey, John. Thank you for the presentation. I guess two-part question. One is especially for the enterprise setting. Do you see? I guess right now a lot of the LLM is targeted for small SMB or maybe some big corporation, but for once all the big enterprise start adopting, I guess AI-backed services or software, do you see the incumbent actually have a leg up because they're already in the enterprise, they already have the relationship, and they also have the domain knowledge, business context, and then they probably already have the RAG pipeline already built up, right, from an enterprise warehouse standpoint.
Yeah, yes, they definitely do. I think it reduces I think I covered that or mentioned that here in the distribution. They have the distribution. They know the people. So it's much easier for them. However, like Copilot has been around for, I don't know, they were the first one.
Mhm.
And what is the adoption? The product, you can still create a better
Right.
product and achieve higher adoption. If one thing you can count on in life is big companies are slow.
True.
Startups always move faster. If you create a better product that makes life better, provides better user experience, then things tend to move that way. But it's a threat, big threat. If, let's say Microsoft had done things right, then it's pretty hard for anybody to, compete.
And the second part is that do you see what complementary technology or areas that you think will be even bigger opportunities, right? I'm just thinking from data standpoint, right? It's a lot of data engineering, governance, eval, right? All those, it seems, I guess people start realizing that's needed, but I think there's not enough, I guess, popular news coverage on those kind of complementary services or product.
I think that's a very good question, Z. That's still developing. So it's not clear yet. At least to me, it's not clear what would be those and how much of those would be in-house, how much of those would be outsourced. One of the popular theme few months ago was, well, SaaS is dead because now the enterprises can develop their own applications using LLM. Well, hasn't really happened. So things that come and go in waves. Jury is still out. But I think if you're working on data pipelines, your job is very secure for a long time.
Got it. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, other questions? That's a good question, Jay. And then, Chander, can you, well, I'm gonna have Chris ask this question and then I'll follow up with a question. Chris, go ahead.
Sure. I'm curious to hear your perspective on how compliance, legal, security may impact the CAC, particularly when your sales teams are engaging highly regulated industries such as healthcare, fintech. higher ed. Obviously, it extends the sales cycle, but has other implications too.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Chris. I mean, you may not be surprised, but I was surprised when I learned that almost 80% of all applications are not in cloud. They are legacy or on-prem. So what we see in cloud today is like 15 to 20%. And a lot of that is, regulation and compliance and legacy and whatever, many reasons. But the sales cycle are longer. But I think it all depends on what is the revenue opportunity. Like Palantir is a good example. They are all over government. So they deployed these, forward deployed engineers, took the risk because they believed in their technology. So that, of course, increases CAC, but it's worth it because the revenue is so big and the lifetime is really long. Lifetime is basically 1 divided by churn. If average customer stays with you, 10 years, or in government case, it may be like 50 years. So it's worth. And if you can get capital easily, then you can deploy a lot of it upfront and then just keep on making money later on. But you're absolutely right. It's higher CAC anytime there's regulation and government is involved. Yes, you had a question too.
Yeah, I'm curious about whether these Gen AI companies are like venture fundable, and how would prospective investors how would investors view these companies and evaluate these companies, especially since there's just so early, there is no prediction around the revenue and the CAC and the churn, and so I'm curious what your take is as an investor and thinking about investing in these types of opportunities.
So I think the old model was get this, like, launch an MVP, iterate, get to scale faster, and things follow. CAC will go down, and you can what's that? If for especially for enterprise, it was land and expand.
Yeah.
But with Gen AI, the investor, I don't think anybody knows.
Right. Exactly.
The theory is the TAM is so big, like 10 trillion versus, a lot of people who missed out on cloud or investing 20 years ago, now they want to go big. So they are investing a lot of money now in these companies. I think valuations are out of whack, but some of them may grow into them. And we don't know how long it'll take, but I think many or most of them won't. The other is the same story as before. If you get a lot of users and you have and you may be losing money and there's no path to positive LTV, but if I keep on investing and you keep on growing and it's a competitive market, one of the bigger guys will buy you. Like Windsurf, I can guarantee they were not making money. There was no LTV positive, but now Cursor is big. Google has a lot of engineers, or they have distribution. Microsoft has distribution. Then what does OpenAI and Anthropic do? They love to buy somebody if they want distribution. So I think it may justify some of the high valuation in the anticipation that it'll be bought. But my view is that everything's overvalued. However, some of those overvalued, very small number, will be justified over time. But the problem is which one?
Yeah, exactly. I would not want to be an investor in this environment. It's just because
but
you don't know what, even Cursor, I saw 100 million in revenue in like, less than 2 years, but we don't even know if it's durable, right? And so you could be chasing sort of that hockey stick. But I saw a tweet this morning. It's like, they're not going to be around in 2 years. No, who knows, right? But it's hard to know what's durable.
Their revenue is
By the
now.
way, while you answer that question, I'm just going to replace the screen share with the QR code because I know some people might have to hop early. I do want to collect some feedback. So everybody, while Chander answers that second part of my question, please do get out your phone and point it to the QR code, or you can type the bit.ly into your desktop and Chandler gets all the feedback. I'm sure he would very greatly appreciate like what you enjoyed about the presentation, what could have gone better, and then share with us other speakers that you'd like to hear from. So, but go ahead, Chandler, go ahead and answer the second
And
question.
that's, I would appreciate the feedback. Thank you. So Cursor revenue is now 500 million.
Oh God, I know that's so crazy.
So I mean, when you say not around, there, it's not gonna be because they ran out of money and they couldn't raise funding.
Yeah.
It's gonna be somebody bought them. So it all depends on. So yeah, they may not be around if somebody buys them, but I don't think they'll go out of business.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's, the risk profile has changed. Previously, you could, I remember my first startup, like the seed round was like 500,000, and now the seed for many companies is like tens of millions, depending on, of course, what they're doing. And you look at the numbers, valuations, OpenAI, it's like bigger than most public companies, 300 something billion. And there's big money, but I don't know. Today they're not justified, but it's about the future. Some people think they can be bigger, uh, so much bigger, so fast. That is justified.
Awesome. Thank you. Other questions?
So maybe one last question. I think a lot of times I'm just thinking companies or what have you, right? More US or Europe centric. What are their geography, like geo, you think there's more opportunities for, I guess, AI or Gen AI based applications?
I think number US and China. The rest, I was giving another talk earlier today, people visiting from Europe, and I was trying to say how to or figure out how to say it politely, but I couldn't, so I shared what facts. If you look at the amount of money the American companies have paid in fines to European Union in last 10 years, add all that number up, let's say that A, and just look at in the last 40 years, new tech companies that are formed in Europe and add up all their earnings, A is much bigger than B. B is the earnings from B. So there, Europe is I love being in Europe, but when it comes to, tech development, I think Mistral is the only thing that kind of comes to mind for AI, and that's national hero. But it's not a capitalist system. The venture is not, and the AI requires big money. Who's going to invest? And the adoption cycles are much slower. The GPU availability, I mean, I don't see Europe. I think US and China, these are the two places where big money's going in, a lot of experiments are being done, and you see adoption. Like companies like Alibaba, Tencent, they are all becoming AI. TikTok is using AI. They're Chinese. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mhm.
Other last questions? where we all drop? Okay, so Chandler, how is the best way for folks to get in touch with you if they have follow-up questions or just want to pick your brain and and chat some more?
Anytime. LinkedIn, I can post this deck in the chat. You can just click on it and you have all my contact information, and also, send me an email or LinkedIn message.
Okay, amazing. Well, thank you so much, Chander. It was super, super dense with really great content. I know I learned a few things. I appreciate you being here. And please stay connected to the community. We'd welcome you back.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ha. I enjoyed it, and I like, putting together my thoughts in a structured way and sharing. So I learned as well just by doing that, and very good questions. Thank you, people who asked the questions. And anytime something's on your mind that I can help with, just ping me.
Amazing. Thank you so much for spending the time. We really appreciate it. And we will see all of you next time.
And thanks for the opportunity, Ha.